and this is the 1922 film, telling a story of a greedy farmer whose crime leads to the death of his loved ones and the emergence of a huge number of man-eating rats. It's the year 1930, and the ex-farmer Wilfred James is wandering the streets of the expanding city. The bustling city already includes 2 3-story houses but cannot yet afford to pave its streets. The gray-haired protagonist, jostling indifferent passers-by consumed with thoughts of the great American dream, makes his way to a local hotel. There he rents a room, attentively listening to what's happening behind the walls. Might think he's interested in his neighbors' personal lives, but the reality is much worse. Sitting at a desk by the window, the man begins to pen a confession on a page. The story then shifts back to the titular year of 1922. James narrates over the footage, explaining his father-in-law left his wife 40 hectares of fertile ground that the former farmer plans to annex to his own land, with the intention of passing it on to his son, Henry. In those pious and God-fearing times, a man's land was his greatest asset, and his son his pride and joy. However, his wife, a hobbyist seamstress, had a decidedly different take on life. She hated living amidst cornfields, where the height of fashion was making clothes for scarecrows. Using her inheritable rights, she wanted to sell all the land to local businesses and move the family into the city. Naturally, this perspective didn't sit well with a man accustomed to working his land with his own 2 hands. At dinner, their teenage son sides with his father, further disheartening the forward-thinking wife. But she couldn't be dissuaded. Her resolve, as solid as Antarctic ice, and the lawyers and legal paperwork were fully on her side. Leaving his wife in bed, James spent the night wandering his ancestral lands and decided to fight as long as he could for his way of life. He offers his better half to buy out her inheritance, even if not all at once, but in parts. It's about 8 years ago, but then commercialism takes the lead. The corporation offers to pay everything at once. The amount is more than the betrothed can afford. He stands up to his full height. About divorce, but James dislikes it. The wife wants to keep the boy for herself, and this completely offends his worldview. The man begins to devise an evil plan. He is tormented by thoughts that he did not just fall out of love with his wife, but also began to openly hate her. He makes plans and warns her that he will not give up his land that easily, without a fight, worsening the situation. Her visit to the city to the lawyers. Then the farmer decides to use his son for his own interests. The boy has already entered the age of sexual maturity and shows signs of interest in the girl next door, the daughter of farmers like them, only more successful. James whispers into Henry's ear, suggesting that his mother wants to separate not only from him, but to take him with her, implying a change of setting to a city life where the country boy will be a misfit and must break up with his beloved girlfriend. The simple idea embedded into the teenager's mind is the following. Without their mother, their life will remain as if were. Simple, understandable, and familiar. The crafty speeches have an impact. The boy distances himself from his mother, leading into a blunt argument and physical violence from his wife's side. But this is not enough. So James resorts to a cunning plan. He tells his wife that he has spoken with their son, who convinced him to relocate to the bigger cities, suggesting there are more opportunities there. The mother would engage in sewing clothes, the father in car repairs, and he himself will acquire a better quality education. Naturally, the woman is fooled by this lie and reluctantly agrees to celebrate their family unity. The event leads to an unforeseeable outcome, as the woman, allowing herself to get overly drunk in her revelry, tells her son in a crude and cynical manner about the joys of sex and the importance of not putting all kinds of interesting body parts into a buddy, otherwise they'll both turn out as boring as she did with Yevon's dad. Along the way, the lady expresses doubts about her son's mental capabilities since he has not yet fully studied the girl next door. Insulted in his brightest emotions, the boy storms back into the house and the father has to drag his murdered wife into the bedroom. After this, the father and son, having consulted, decide that the mother in their arduous farming work is not just clueless, but also greatly harmful. This leads to the realization of a long overdue decision to kill her, done in the most foolish way possible. As if a seasoned vegetarian who has never slaughtered cattle, he slaughters his faithful wife with the help of his son. The males drag the lifeless body, wrapped in a blanket, down to an old well, letting it fall. There, like a bell's chime, they begin to meticulously cover their tracks. Firstly, they wash away the blood traces wherever possible. Then they create a diversion by fabricating a narrative of a woman tormented by rural life fleeing to the big city. To accomplish this, they gather a suitable assortment of the best dresses, choose a suitcase, jewelry, and sentimental knickknacks, and then throw it all in the same well. During one of these trips, just when the sun is dimly shining, James stumbles upon rats inhabiting they are gnawing at his wife's dead body, a sight that profoundly disturbs the farmer. The haunting image of his wife's dead body in a rat's mouth will pursue him in his nightmares for a long time. One afternoon, a car pulls up to the house with a lawyer inside. James, being stern and straightforward, doesn't even want to shake hands with the smooth city slicker, but he shows no prejudice towards the driver who brought him, offering him cold milk. The lawyer has come to draw up the paperwork for selling the land, but the owner is nowhere to be found. No, so there's nothing you can do. The lawyer has to get out, but there's a lot of money behind him, so the local sheriff soon arrives to make sure that the farmer is not keeping his wife against her will in the house. By then, James realizes that he needs to cover his tracks thoroughly and decides to take a thoughtful step. He leads the cow onto the manhole that closes the well, making it fall under the cow. The poor animal breaks its bones and screams in pain. He has to shoot it with a rifle. Then, to stop the smell of rotting meat from spreading throughout the area, including the deceased wife, the farmer and his son filled the well with dirt. When the sheriff arrives, James lets him into the house to look around without question, unlike the lawyer, who caused personal trouble and quarreled with the local official. The police officer carefully examines the house and the room, but finds no suspicious inconsistencies. In the end, the farmer even invites him to take a look at the well with the dead cow, but the sheriff decides not to shake his psyche once again and refuses. Soon, it's time to harvest. For this, the equipment of neighboring farmers is subcontracted along with working hands. During a short break, the neighbor's daughter, Henry's son's lover, asks James if something has happened to the boy. He's become too distant, constantly frowning. The man does his best to calm the girl down. One night, a frantic commotion from the cattle can be heard from the barn. A farmer with a flashlight and a gun goes to check what's wrong. In the barn, he finds rats, the same ones that have made their way out of the bed's pipe. The man quickly plugs the hole, returns to the house, but is intercepted by his dead wife in the doorway. In the morning, he seals the pipe, but rats and hallucinations suddenly become not his biggest issue. His son informs him that his girlfriend is pregnant and they're only 15 years old. This isn't really a problem in the countryside, but the girl's dad is a successful farmer, firmly against his daughter marrying a poor boy. Besides, remembering his own experience with a headstrong wife, James isn't keen on getting married. Moreover, he's naturally envious of the potential father-in-law who has a better house, a wife who doesn't contradict him, and a shiny car. Failed father-in-law visits politely to inform him of his plan to erase the family shame. Daughter will be sent to a Catholic monastery where she'll stay until the birth. Once the child is adopted, she'll return. This will also spare the girl, the kid, from having to shoulder the burden of family life, but it will cost money. James is asked to contribute not even half of the $300, a third in the amount of $75, but he doesn't have that kind of money either. Henry's son is categorically against such a development of events. He is serious and ready to take responsibility for both himself and his beloved with a child, but James fundamentally disagrees. He is ready to dig the ground to pay for his idea. To do this, he searches the entire house in search of his wife's stash, preparing to open a sewing workshop, but there is still not enough cash. Then he goes to the city straight to the bank. There he is offered not to trifle to take a measly $35, immediately $750 secured by real estate, of course. But with this money, the farmer will be able to patch up and put the house and the farm in order. Without losing the remnants of prudence, James refuses to get into the debt pit leaves. But on the way out, he notices a note from his son in the car. He stole the second car, ran away with... Her lover moved away from her parents to live her independent life. Left alone, James again succumbs to the hallucinations. He is terrorized by the image of his murdered wife and droplets of blood in the water dripping from the ceiling. As a result, he can't bear it anymore and takes the sewing dummy to his wife in the basement. The next morning, the sheriff informs him that someone has robbed a store nearby. According to the description, the robber resembles the runaway Henry, only the individual elements of the clothing don't match. James steadfastly refuses to suspect his son of any crimes, but this forces him to mortgage the house for $750 in order to go in search of his offspring. Just as he was getting ready to go, a rat pounced on him, splattering the money with blood along the way, which makes them somewhat suspicious. Washing the floor, he falls into psychosis, drinks alcohol, lies on the couch under a hole in the ceiling, and watches snowflakes fall on an unheated house. He is tormented by nightmares, haunted by the vision of his dead wife. The wife eventually catches up with the unborn husband to whisper in his ear what is known only to the dead. She tells about the fate of their son. Having run away with the girl, he bought a revolver with the last of his money. With its help, he robbed several stores, but in one of them, when they were already running away, the owner came out with a pistol and shot after them. A bullet struck the pregnant girl. Stuck somewhere in the fields in a car, Henry carried his beloved through the snow-covered fields to the nearest house, hiding her in an abandoned barn. The boy went to search for firewood, but when he came back, she was already dead, unable to bear it. In his despair, he lay next to her and shot himself with a purchased revolver. Up until then, all this information was unreliable. Sheriff James, frostbitten and with his left hand amputated, then got notified that remains of a woman resembling his wife who has been robbed trying to reach Canada were found. A farmer, aware of the truth, agreed to this version of the story. Later, the bodies of his son Henry and his girlfriend were taken to the city. During the identification, James saw that the boy's face was gnawed by rats, just like his wife's, before she was thrown into a well. During the girl's memorial service, a whole hall filled up with sympathizers, while only the father and the ghost of his wife, attended by a retinue of rats, came to bid farewell to Henry. James tries to sell his land to a neighbor, but after the death of his daughter, he has nothing to do with farming. The unfulfilled father-in-law notices that they end this year in the same way, having lost their children and wives. Returning home, the hero notices that the last cow that lived with him in the house has fallen from the porch and is lying wounded. He becomes the last straw. He finishes off the cattle with a gun. As a result, he has to sell the land at a negligible price and go to the big city himself, getting a job as a loader at a factory. But even there, he is chased by furry and tailed rodents, rats. After living there for a long time, James comes to the conclusion that he should have done something different, agreeing to his wife's proposal to move or at least divide the property and divorce. When James finishes writing his confession, he turns around, and the rats have gnawed through the wall. In the middle stand the ghosts of his wife, son, and would-be daughter-in-law, creepy, pale, with disfigured and gnawed faces. Barely holding back his tears, James patiently awaits his fate, realizing that he deserves to be punished in full. The screen goes dark.